PT, short for Playable Teaser, was shadow dropped on the PS4 on August 12, 2014. The game involves a looping hallway in a house which is being haunted by various ghosts, the most prominent of which being Lisa, a wife who was murdered by her husband Jack. Understandably, due to PT being essentially the only thing to come of the Silent Hills project, there's been a great deal of analysis on it, probably more than the entirety of the rest of the series combined, starting from the game's strange environments and dialogue, and then branching into trying to uncover the cryptic clues to unlock the ending, the delisting of the game after Kojima and Konami cut ties, and so on and so forth. It's easy to fall down a rabbit hole with this game due to how deliberately ambiguous it is. Heck, I'll be falling into a few of them myself. In a lot of ways, it's a full realization of the David Lynch influence the series was always kind of known for. This game is packed full of meaning, and it doesn't provide any easy answers, with even its ending feeling like waking up from a dream more than a conclusion to the narrative. Now, normally at these videos, I would say to play the game yourself, but that is currently not easily possible. Due to the situation between Kojima and Konami, as I mentioned before, the game was delisted from the PlayStation Store in April 2015, making it impossible to download it again unless you happen to have a license for it. In which case, you can do an overly complicated method to re-download through a proxy server. You can't even transfer or play the game on PS5, as it was specifically made to be inaccessible despite working fine during the beta period, with a spokesperson at Sony confirming that it was the publisher's decision to do so. Other options via emulation and fan recreations aren't looking much better. PC emulation for PS4, while extremely promising, is still pretty early stages, and the fan projects, when they aren't being hit with cease and desist or being locked behind paywalls, are generally mixed in quality, since they understandably aren't able to capture a lot of the game's more subtle details. Since I didn't have access to PT, I went ahead anyway and played a few fan recreations. My personal recommendation if you absolutely have to play one being Unreal PT, and watch plenty of Let's Plays, with the footage you're seeing now coming from a long play by Spazbo4. PT is technically a form of lost media, but it isn't lost in the same way as, say, a lost film, since all of its original files have been preserved by multiple people, but it is lost in the legal sense from attempts to make it as inaccessible as possible, which ironically makes people talk about the project that much more and spearheads a lot of preservation efforts. PT is an incredibly important and influential game that I feel deserves to be experienced in its original form. While PT certainly didn't invent the concept of first-person survival horror, indie titles like Amnesia or Slender the 8 Pages predate it certainly helped popularize the concept further, with Resident Evil 7 taking cues from how it obfuscated itself for its various playable teasers, particularly Kitchen, which was a tech demo for the full project that was not labeled as such.
So I didn't know what to expect walking in. I just heard a few people telling me, like, it's the scariest thing you'll ever play, like, go do it. First of all, it's not the scariest thing I've ever played. PT is the scariest thing.
Also worth noting is how it influenced Devotion by Red Candle Games, which is an excellent title that, somewhat ironically, was also delisted from every digital storefront except the developer's personal website, due to issues with a piece of graffiti art that was removed. Go buy Devotion if you can, it's available from the first link in the description. Oh, right, and Layers of Fear was also influenced by PT. That exists. Anyway, PT was essentially the series' Resident Evil 4 moment, where many of the same concepts and DNA of the prior titles are very much present, while showing things in a new and interesting light. The overall hype around PT's surprise reveal of being a Silent Hill title, along with growing animosity towards Konami as a company, catapulted its status in the mainstream, which was later compounded by its delisting in a very public incident at the Game Awards 2015, in which Jeff Knightley explained to a huge audience that Kojima was not allowed to attend due to Konami directly preventing him from doing so.
As you noticed, Hideo Kojima is not here with us tonight, and I want to tell you a little bit about that. Mr. Kojima had every intention of being with us tonight, but unfortunately he was informed by a lawyer representing Konami just recently that he would not be allowed to travel to tonight's awards ceremony to accept any awards. He's still under an employment contract, and it's disappointing, and it's inconceivable to me that an artist like Hideo would not be allowed to come here and celebrate with his peers and his fellow teammates such an incredible game as Metal Gear Solid 5. But that's the situation we're in.
This situation is well known, but it is worth reiterating, like, genuinely, What the hell do you mean Kojima is put on a different floor from the rest of his team and couldn't speak to him directly for the last 6 months of development for the Phantom Pain? While I understand in theory the concerns over the game's $80 million budget, a fact that is now a little bit laughable in the face of many AAA games now requiring $200 million or more, in my opinion, the treatment of Kojima over this was very disrespectful to an industry professional who had worked for the company for almost 30 years. I feel this way regardless of how Kojima may had allegedly wasted time and resources on various small details, and even considering some personal reservations I have with the Phantom Pain as art, because regardless, I don't feel anyone should have been treated the way he did, and it allegedly extends further out to other employees. While this may not necessarily be the case now, according to sources, Konami during this period of time were doing a lot of things that devalued their labor force, through corporate restructuring which placed the power with the corporation rather than the actual developers, to it being reported by Nikkei in 2015 how employees were being monitored via cameras and publicly shamed for taking too long of lunch breaks, with staff of all levels being put to menial labor when they aren't seen as useful anymore. This was further followed up by Nikkei in 2017, which reported that many ex-Konami developers were being denied health insurance and were not being allowed to use their experience with Konami on their resume. The delisting of PT and cancellation of Silent Hills is, in my eyes, symbolic of a lot of these problems, where art is considered secondary to a bottom line. It is nothing short of tragic to me that PT is not easily accessible, and is something that a decade later still deserves criticism for since it was never rectified. But that's all the past, and the past can't be changed. All I can do now is contend with PT as a work of art and the meaning lying within. Let's get started. Now, there's a lot to talk about with the game due to its complex postmodern themes, and it's very easy to get lost in the reeds of various interesting details, so I'll quickly go ahead and summarize the first half of the game and discuss that, then discuss the game's meta-narrative implications in the second half.
Watch out. The gap in the door. It's a separate reality. The only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you?
This cryptic statement is what kicks off the game, a warning of things to come, or perhaps things that already came to pass. The room you wake up in is some form of liminal space, with concrete floors and a table in the corner with something on it. Stepping into the house proper, you may notice that you can't re-enter where you left from, seemingly confirming the room and the house are separate realities. While the details of the house are quite weird on their own, most players' attention will be drawn to a radio playing a news broadcast recounting a series of gruesome murders all done by fathers.
The day of the crime, the father went to the trunk of his car, retrieved the rifle, and shot his wife as she was cleaning up the kitchen after lunch. When his 10-year-old son came to investigate the commotion, the father shot him too. His 6-year-old daughter had the good sense to hide in the bathroom, but reports suggest he lured her out by telling her it was just a game. The girl was found shot once in the chest from point-blank range. The mother, who he shot in the stomach, was pregnant at the time. Police arriving on scene after neighbors called 911 found the father in his car, listening to the radio. Several days before the murders, neighbors say they heard the father repeating a sequence of numbers in a loud voice. They said it was like he was chanting some strange spell.
It's impossible to leave, and the door to the bathroom appears locked, so the only way forward is down the steps, kicking out the first loop and the beginning of Lisa's hauntings. Each successive loop seems to become more and more violent, with objects falling and strange surreal events happening. After various loops, everything restarts when Lisa kills you, with the intro quote being repeated again by the thing on the table.
I walked. I could do nothing but walk. And then I saw me walking in front of myself. But it wasn't really me.
This culminates in viewing a reenactment of Lisa's murder via a peephole, and her unborn fetus recounting the events that led to this situation using the radio man's voice.
You got fired, so you drowned your sorrows in booze. She had to get a part-time job working a grocery store cash register. Only reason she could earn a wage at all is the manager liked how she looked in a skirt. You remember, right? Exactly 10 months back.
After seeing all this, the hauntings completely stop, with time turning over to midnight, and after a while the game begins glitching out, the numbers 204863 being repeated until it crashes. the exact screen it crashes on being randomized. So that's a bare bones summary of events. Now let's start filling in the details. First, let's examine the actual space you're existing in. While Kojima's intentions were to deliberately lower the game's graphical fidelity to hide the fact that it was made on the Fox engine, I still think to this day this is one of the most well-realized game spaces from an atmosphere and aesthetic standpoint. The lighting is very well done, and the usage of rain combined with the excellent sound design creates an unnerving space that nevertheless feels grounded despite the game's central concept. The game in total only consists of 3 rooms, the liminal space at the start, the main hallway, and the bathroom, with the rest of the house not being visible aside from a small part of the second floor and a little bit of the outside. From what we can see of the house, there's a lot of things subtly wrong with it. There's an absurd amount of beer bottles and prescription pills strewn about the place, implying heavy drug use, along with half-eaten candy and a child's toy. The hallways are rather long, the photos on the walls are pretty abstract, the windows are barred, and the clock is stuck at 11:59. Considering how the other world was handled in the other games, it's reasonable to assume that this is both a representation of a real place, and also partly abstracted based on the beholder's fears and history. This is further reinforced by how the progressive loops lead you steadily downwards thanks to the steps near the other door in the hallway, creating the sense that you're progressing further and further into hell. These details, large and small, create some subtle psychological effects. Something is very clearly wrong here, but you can't put your finger on exactly what it is. Of course, the clearest sign of something wrong would be Lisa's hauntings, so let's go ahead and talk about her in detail. First, let's discuss her appearance. We know from the scene shown at the murder that Lisa was stabbed and implied to have been drowned, with her nightgown indicating this happened in the dead of night, potentially while she was trying to sleep. Her right eye was gouged out, her left eye is bulging, and she has blood on her dress indicating trauma to her stomach resulting in a miscarriage. Also of note is her hair, which is a darker color than the photographs. Some take this to mean they are 2 different people, which is incorrect as part of one puzzle requires gouging out the eye of a photo, the same eye that Lisa is missing, implying a link. This type of color symbolism has appeared multiple times in the series, and consistently represents the contrast between life and death. Maria and Mary, Heather and Alessa, Cynthia and the 16th victim, etc. So Lisa having darker hair is par for the course in this regard. Lisa is also consistently associated with cockroaches, which combined with the doomsday theming carries with it the idea that even if you attempt to remove someone for the sake of a cult's ideals, they will still persist on and gain power so long as you cling to those ideals. Let's now look at Lisa's behavior. Between the noises she makes, which fluctuate between laughter and sobbing, and her strange movements, it appears as if she is taking joy in the player's torment. Notably, Lisa killing the player does not break the loop, it perpetuates it, and Lisa herself is able to go to places the player can't, such as the second floor and outside. You and her are linked together in this place, but it is not an equal partnership, and you are mostly at her mercy. This brings us to the main character, who has quite a lot of debate on his identity due to the ending and various smaller details seemingly contradicting the idea that you are playing as Lisa's killer, although we do know at least what he looks like and that his name is Jack.
I walked till I stood one pace before Jack.
For Kojima's part, the intention was to have the main character as an ordinary person and not a strong character. Quote, "In the trailer for Silent Hills, Norman Reedus is the main character, and in The Walking Dead, he appeared as a strong character. But in horror, if the character is strong, it's not scary," Kojima said. Because the player and the character are synchronized, if a person is easily scared, and the main character is strong like Snake, then the fear factor is lowered. So, in PT, the main character is cast as an ordinary person to try to bring the game and the players in sync. While this doesn't directly answer the question, it does appear this ambiguity was intentional in order to have you fill the main character's shoes, which by effect approaches the idea of a fugue state not unlike Silent Hill 2. Consider how Lisa's murder is framed in the game. You are not literally seeing it from the killer's point of view, you are peering at it in a voyeuristic manner through a hole in the wall. Perhaps what the game is getting at by not directly answering who you're actually playing as is how it would feel if you didn't know the only you was you, where you commit actions so horrible you feel like it was a different person who did it, becoming a witness to your own crimes. Silent Hill 2 explored this theme via the videotape, where James watches a recording of himself murdering his wife, and PT is doing it by forcing you to see things from a distance, with the notable exception being when you're murdered by Lisa, which puts you as the object and her as the subject. Let's take, for instance, the thing in the brown bag. I interpret it to be a projection of Jax, some version of him who gave up with trying to escape purgatory and accepted being stuck in limbo forever. This is reinforced by the many scratches on the wall implying tries or days, and how you can't actually talk to the bag unless you've died once, resetting the loop. He knows that the only me is me because he literally can't leave, so he doesn't have to enter the separate reality in which being a killer is reality. So why is that all important? Well, let's now discuss our last character and what the game is saying about indoctrination. The voice on the radio takes on some strange metatextual qualities no other character exhibits, beyond fluctuating between stating supposed facts on murders done by fathers, and saying odd conspiratorial things like to not trust the tap water.
Don't touch that dial now, we're just getting started. You can't trust the tap water. Look behind you. I said, look behind you.
He is also the voice of the fetus in the sink, and the last voice we hear before the game transitions to the trailer at the end. We'll discuss the metatextual implications in a moment, but let's first focus on those news reports. I often see these read as literally describing what Jack did to Lisa and his family, but that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Too many of the basic details are wrong, such as the time frame and method of murder, and there's multiple different murders mentioned instead of just one. I think it makes more sense to read these as real events that did happen in the setting, something that prior Silent Hill games have done before with various notes, but not directly related to what happened in this house in specific, so much as thematic setup for what the game is trying to say about murders like these. First off, we know for a fact Jack listens to the radio considering, well, he owns the one you're listening to, so we can reasonably assume he was also hearing and even repeating the same numbers the other fathers were hearing and saying. There's also notes on social conditions that may have caused issues facing the average family. We know Jack lost his job and turned to alcoholism, and that he had suspicions of an affair that Lisa may have been having with her boss, although there is no confirmation anything actually happened. This left him prime in order to be indoctrinated into the belief that what he was dealing with was not solely his fault, and was due to society at large instead. A line of thinking often used by abusers to justify their actions that is reinforced with the radio man more or less saying this during Lisa's murder.
Our society is rotten to the core. I'm talking to all the fine, upstanding folks got their welfare cut, got their jobs pulled out from under them. Yeah, you know what to do. Now's the time. Do it.
This takes on a warped religious connotation with the Gouge It Out puzzle, in reference to a passage in Matthew 5:29, which notably was intended to be hyperbolic. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. This is part of what makes PT such an interesting new narrative for the series, despite having surface-level similarities to Silent Hill 2. One thing the series hadn't explored before is the possibility of someone being fully indoctrinated into the cult without physically being in Silent Hill. The closest we get would be in Silent Hill 3 and 4, with Heather potentially embodying the cult's ideals in the possessed ending by having her need for revenge be turned against her, and Walter Sullivan being lied to and abused through various circumstances for decades into becoming a mass murderer. In both cases, we see people before they ever really interact with the cult, and their relative normalcy because of it, before getting twisted and hurt by them to suit certain ideals. The Order seeks to create a world of eternal suffering in reaction to a world that causes so much grief and suffering, a cycle of violence with no beginning or end, which very notably was influenced by a warped form of Christian beliefs very similar to real-life cults.
I don't need another world. It's fine the way it is.
But you said it yourself. The world must first be cleansed with fire.
But that's not what I want now.
Alyssa, don't you want happiness? Have you become blind to all the hopeless suffering in the world? We all need God's salvation!
Listen, suffering is a fact of life. Either you learn how to deal with that or you go under. You can stay in your own little dream world, but you can't keep hurting other people.
To properly discuss the implications of all that, we'll need to start bringing up some real-life context again. When I first talked about Silent Hill 1, I brought up how it was influenced by a lot of American media at the time when writing Alessa as a victim and not a perpetrator, which in turn brought forward things relevant to that media when it was made, in specific the Vietnam War and how the large-scale reaction to that led to people seeking simpler answers rather than accepting the realities of dehumanization. I further expanded on this when I discussed Silent Hill 2, noting how it was heavily inspired by David Lynch's Lost Highway, which in turn was inspired by the O.J. Simpson trial. In all of these examples, a continual theme is the construction of specific narratives in order to suit specific purposes. The narratives that OJ was a good or bad person, for instance, came about from a contrast between him being a highly successful athlete and marketing salesman versus the potential reality of him being a murderer, which created a media frenzy looking to sell specific ideas to people willing to watch. The narrative that the Vietnam War was necessary came into question over time, partly due to the realities of the war being visible on people's televisions, alongside various other social problems bubbling up over decades. I feel that PT in turn is attempting to be a discussion around these types of narrative constructions, specifically the formation of how we interpret abuse-victim dynamics and false dualisms between psychological pain or patriarchal power. In the essay Familicide, Gender, and Mental Illness, Beyond False Dualisms, Denise Whiten discusses the issues of only using one of these frameworks. Quote, "In cases that map more cleanly onto feminist-informed understandings of domestic and family violence, for example, a known history of domestic abuse preceding murders in the context of separation or custody disputes, a domestic violence lens is more likely to be taken up. In cases that do not present this way, news media is more likely to adopt news frames that position familicide as mysterious, unsolvable tragedies. The clearest point of hope for finding answers is assumed to be the excavation of the troubled psyche of perpetrators. In both cases, what these constructions disallow is an examination of common gender drivers of both mental distress and patterned male violence against women, and how both are profoundly intertwined. When I talked about Silent Hill 2, I brought up the complexity that arises from James suffering from trauma, despite the fact that he enacted the greatest form of objectification possible by murdering Mary. This is because that while what he did is horrific and unforgivable, the narrative is going to great lengths to show what it would be like in his shoes, what it would feel like.
There's still no effective treatment for her condition.
How long does she have?
I'm afraid I'm not sure. 3 years at most. Perhaps 6 months. It's impossible to say with certainty.
Mary?
What do you want, James?
I brought you some flowers.
Flowers? I don't want any damn flowers. Just go home already.
Mary, what are you saying?
Look, I'm disgusting. I don't deserve flowers. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here! Leave me alone already! I'm no use to anyone. I'll be dead soon anyway. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. It'd be easier if they'd just kill me. But I guess the hospital is making a nice profit off me. They want to keep me alive. Are you still here? I told you to go. Are you deaf? Don't come back. James, wait. Please don't go. Stay with me. Don't leave me alone. I didn't mean what I said. Please, James. Tell me I'll be okay. Tell me I'm not going to die. Help me.
So when I said that a lot of mutual abuse happened, that is not me saying that therefore Mary deserved to die or anything like that. What I'm getting at is that only reducing the discussion to James being an abuser who murdered a victim paints over the realities of abuse and plays into the notion of perfect or ideal victims. The idea that for someone to be worthy of sympathy, they had to have been someone who had done absolutely no wrong and was weak and vulnerable and completely morally pure, which in the vast majority of abuse cases is never true. Mary lashing out at James is not a justification for James murdering her, particularly when James was extremely emotionally distant for years and was in charge of their finances, which Mary had no control over. Their dynamic maps onto an abuser-victim dichotomy, but isn't done simply to condemn James so much as to question his perspective on events, and potentially have him be able to learn and change so he doesn't enact the same horrible events again. which is something that I believe Mary would have wanted for him despite everything he did.
Do what's best for you, James. James, you made me happy.
So when looking at the text of PT, we can see similar things, where Jack is very much the abuser, and Lisa and her family very much being the victims. However, we don't have all the details of the situation, since we are seeing everything in its aftermath. We aren't even necessarily sure how many people Jack killed considering the fridge, which is an ambiguity being used to critique his headspace. Lisa may have been having an affair, but we don't actually know, and even if we assume that it was a consensual affair, that would still in no way justify her being murdered by Jack. Jack, even being slighted by Lisa being the breadwinner, still held a lot of power over her socially due to patriarchal structures. And I seriously doubt Lisa was fond of the idea that she was only able to hold a job due to her boss's sexual attraction to her. Lisa was stuck in a no-win situation, where every choice she made was going to be interpreted to be the wrong one. On the flip side, if we only read Jack as the abuser, we are ignoring both the social and mental conditions that led him to be manipulated and indoctrinated by the Order via the radio, which was very specifically instilling paranoia and using activation phrases like the sequence of numbers to push fathers into being murderers. The devaluing and objectification of women and children is not something that just arises out of the ether to cause harm. It is informed primarily by social circumstances that create situations in which it is considered acceptable or at least an option to do so, which is what makes the horror of PT so poignant and relevant. If you think I'm reaching with all of this, consider that the opening lines to Metal Gear Solid, which Kojima co-wrote, are explicitly about the threat of nuclear weapons and the realities of war. In MGS2, also co-written by Kojima, the entire plot is about how Raiden is being molded and shaped into being the ideal soldier, and how he only regains a sense of identity by forging his own path and being with the woman he loves.
Can I ask you something? Who am I, really?
I wouldn't know. But we're going to find out together, aren't we?
Oh. Yeah.
See me for what I am, okay?
Cultural context matters, and if headlines about fathers murdering their families makes national news in real life continually for years, odds are discussions around that are going to influence someone's writing when tackling that subject. Digging into the implications as to why a narrative decision was made or not via the usage of real-life context is not injecting information into a text, it's elaborating on what was already there. PT is a story of layers to it, from the artifice of the game itself down into the core of the narrative, and like a lot of Kojima's games, this is being used in order to discuss extremely complex postmodern themes. He did it with Metal Gear Solid 2, he did it with Death Stranding, he did it here. And Lord, that's not even getting into the very valid interpretation that PT is a metaphor for Kojima's headspace while working on the Phantom Pain, or the hundreds of other perfectly valid interpretations out there. Kojima, what are you doing to me here, man? This now finally brings us to the game's second half, starting with the fake crash brought on by the radio voice's continual repeating of 204-863. The game's mechanics before this point had a lot of toying around with metatextual aspects. This is hinted at early on with Lisa's photograph falling on the ground with R3 written on it, indicating you need to press R3 in order to zoom the game's camera, and by extension interact with various objects. More than just being an incidental detail, this is core to a lot of strange puzzles, including moving letters on a wall to change a message, or finding a photo fragment on the pause screen. When the game fake crashes, some of the error messages even makes note of the game's fiction, along with what appears to be a conversation between Jay, presumed Jack, and another party, which I interpret to be Jack talking directly to the player and urging them to come to Silent Hill, somewhat similar to Mary's letter in Silent Hill 2. There's a lot of ways to read this, since obviously if we're talking literally, then nothing in the game itself is actually real, but the concepts in it certainly are. Lisa, for instance, is a game character who does not physically exist, but she represents various ideas about murder victims that the game's narrative is using to convey something to the player. I personally interpret this to be a way to convey what the Order's indoctrination would feel like if you had to experience it yourself, very literally questioning your reality in order to implant specific ideas into your head. Whether that means the game itself is a simulation distributed by the cult, or like a Ring VHS tape or something, is ambiguous, but it is spooky nonetheless to have the game be aware of your presence and try to mess with you that way.
Infinite ammo.
Let's also consider the continual reiteration of 204863 as the activation phrase. There's been a lot of debate as to what the numbers actually mean, usually attempting to argue it's Kojima's birthday. However, the numbers don't completely line up with the way that would be written in Japanese, and moreover, the numbers aren't really relevant to the story. They aren't keys to any puzzles, and they aren't hints as to the game's current date, like with the continual references to 75 years ago, linking to the War of the Worlds radio broadcast, pretty solidly setting the game in late 2013, when it would have been under development. I've seen people claim the numbers are the coordinates to the Bermuda Triangle, or references to 8-bit binary, or an anagram for look at the bathtub in Japanese, or the name of the husband, and so on and so on. In my opinion, this is a deliberately unsolvable mystery, which is certainly not unusual for the series, since part of good surrealist horror is to not answer everything, but give just enough to understand what is being indicated from abstract symbolic visuals and dialogue. But let's assume like any of these answers were correct. Let's say that yes, the numbers were Kojima's birthday. Okay, so now they're Kojima's birthday. And what? We have an answer now, but nothing about the text has really changed, since their function within the story is separate from their potential meaning. Regardless of what the numbers represent, they are being used to coerce multiple fathers into committing murders, leading to the implication that each father may have had a different interpretation of what those numbers meant to them personally. Heck, they may have even been hearing a different set of numbers, we don't know. For the player, having these numbers be continually reiterated before the game's fake crash is priming you to start seeing the game the way that a conspiracy theorist might, since pretty literally you have to play one for a bit in order to solve the clues necessary to get the ending. So let's finally get into that. As stated, the second half of the game requires unraveling deliberately cryptic clues in order to unlock the front door, while Lisa more actively haunts you within the world's space rather than being confined to specific set pieces. This shift is very deliberate, as we saw the hauntings ramp up in intensity up until we heard Lisa's actual murder, and then the game crashed resetting the loop, but not our actual understanding of Lisa. So, in a gameplay sense, her actually moving around the same space you occupy makes her a lot more real than before, more present, because she has in the player's mind become more real as a person, since we understand how she came to be like this. From a mechanical perspective, solving this puzzle involves waiting until the clock turns to midnight, walking 10 steps and stopping, then going near where Lisa is haunting and saying the word Jack into your microphone, and then staying completely still until the telephone rings. Kojima intended this section to take at least a week to solve, but it ended up being solved the same day of release. These solutions were deduced by clues in the game involving translating various languages and reversing audio, so let's take a bit to discuss the meaning of the poem you assemble from either Lisa's photo pieces or the radio. Actually assembling and translating the poem was clearly the element Kojima intended to require collaborative effort with others, since not only are the fragments not numbered, but the actual meaning of what is being conveyed can be easily lost from nuances in translating from one language to another. Considering how Death Stranding's themes are very much about trying to connect with and understand other people, this was clearly something that was on Kojima's mind when working on this project as well. Note that my focus on Kojima isn't to devalue the work done by other people, it's just that to me, his authorial voice is the most clear and readable. Since there isn't really an official translation of the poem, or even what order it's supposed to go in, I went ahead and examined multiple translations and compiled it myself. But this is in no way an official or objectively correct translation, since that's pretty much impossible on purpose. Anyway, here's my read of it, combined with the original language in blue for comparisons. I walked till I stood one pace before Jack. Heart pounding. I no longer moved while I waited inertly, then his index finger slipped onto my hand. The moment our hands overlap, we share an instant of private darkness. His touch, cold like marble, so much that he was shivering. I whispered his name, but the night wind took his voice away. Never moving a step, his hand in mine, I waited for it to pass. And through a fog of fading consciousness, I thought I heard a phone. My voice, can you hear it? This sign, can you read it? I'll wait forever if you'll just come to me. Now, from my perspective, I believe that this poem is from Lisa's point of view, possibly in her last moments before she is killed by Jack, and is describing the nature of their relationship. This moment was intended to be intimate, but is instead colored by a sense of fear, with Jack acting extremely cold towards her to the point he was shivering. This moment is then interrupted by the phone ringing, which I interpret to be when Jack gets chosen as someone to carry out the Order's will. This poem also serves as clues for how to reach the ending, which is interesting to read since the meaning then shifts to be from your perspective instead of Lisa's, and the differences between you, the player, and Jack. Nothing carries your voice away when you say Jack, and you as a living person have warm hands. There is something so deeply intimate and personal about this, which makes me have a great deal of empathy towards Lisa and what she went through. Before she disappears and the realities separate, you are able to provide a source of comfort to her by just simply existing with her without fear for a moment, and to me helps show mechanically Lisa's transformation from the antagonist into the tragic victim she always was. It is a moment that transcends language, human connection despite circumstance and genre and systems. Now, perhaps you disagree with my read here. Maybe you disagree with all of my reads so far, and that's fair. PT is a multifaceted text, and what stands out to one person may not do the same to someone else. This isn't a situation where there is necessarily a right or wrong way to read this, within reason, since sort of the point of poetry is to draw meaning from it that was always there through the lens of your own personal subjective experience. Quoting Kojima again, "What people see depends on their experience or trauma. Even in the same scenery, some people may see a human shadow, while some people may see a rock as a human face." So with all that done, this finally brings us to the ending, where we step outside into a shot of Norman Reedus, with that Silent Hills logo and the music playing and all that good stuff. Before that, though, we get one last message from the voice on the radio, this time heavily implying that he and the fetus are actually one and the same.
Dad was such a drag. Every day he'd eat the same kind of food, dress the same, sit in front of the same kind of games. Yeah, he was just that kind of guy. But then one day he goes and kills us all. He couldn't even be original about the way he did it. I'm not complaining. I was dying of boredom anyway. But guess what? I will be coming back, and I'm bringing my new toys with me.
This dialogue I find both kind of funny and extremely interesting. If we do genuinely take this to be from the perspective of Jack's child, then he is directly mocking him for going along with the cult and murdering him the way so many other fathers did, never questioning the conditions that led him down the same path. But instead of just being another murder victim, the implication is that Jack's kid will rise above what was done and be able to cause something new instead. What a great playable trailer. I can't wait for the final game. Alright. There's never been much concrete information on what Silent Hills was intended to be, although it was at least confirmed that PT and Silent Hills were not related canonically by Kojima directly. The best guess I can personally come up with was it was going to be about people's individual perspectives on Silent Hill, hence the pluralizing of the title, potentially of Norman Reedus' character serving as an investigator in order to resolve people's conflicts. For the most part, it seemed like the Silent Hills project was in extremely preliminary stages, with a concept trailer unveiled at TGS 2014, a month after PT was released, that indicated some earlier potential concepts that may or may not have been included in the full game. Concept trailers like these are generally not meant to be shown to the public. They're intended for publishers and to nail down specific aesthetic ideas and vibes that the creators would like to see in the full release. Considering how controlled Kojima was during the development of the Phantom Pain, I have serious doubts the project ever progressed past the very early stages, and if it did, I imagine the people who own the rights to it will never let it see the light of day, which is a great shame. That said, Kojima has moved on with his own independent studio working on his own games. Death Stranding is pretty weird and interesting. Maybe I'll talk about that eventually. And with the announcement of OD, it was uncovered from the trailer the letters ATAMI, spelling Atami, and referencing a city in the Shizuoka prefecture. PT itself made a coy reference to Silent Hill, the fake studio of 7780S Studio, which in square kilometers also refers to Shizuoka Prefecture, literally translated to mean quiet hills, and is a nickname associated with the series in Japan. Considering how in-depth I went on PT, which, worth reiterating, was a separate, 30-minute teaser for a game that never came out, I imagine that once OD releases, I'll fully spiral into madness and be happy the entire time. More seriously, to summarize the points I've made here, PT is a representation of a lot of unrealized potential, a bold step forward for Silent Hill that was never taken. The game deals with some extremely dark subject matter in an interesting, effective way that adds a great deal of intrigue and mystique to a franchise that a lot of fans at the time felt was lacking it due to the mismanagement of various sequels. It's one of the best horror games ever made, and I hope in the future its original release will be fully playable to everyone once again. Thank you again to Spazbo4 for the Let's Play footage I used in this video, and also of course thank you to my Patreon for their support. If you would like to support me financially, I have a link to my Patreon in the description, and you can also simply do the old like, comment, subscribing. That's all for today. See ya.
I know what I am. You're just trying to hurt me. You're a goddamn hypocrite. Just look at the pain you've caused. That was not my fault, you son of a bitch.